Colton, being a rural community with its roots steeped in agriculture, has a long history over many years of producing crops and animals to sustain the villagers. The annual Harvest Festival, held on the Sunday of the harvest moon, the Sunday closest to the autumn equinox, has been celebrated over the centuries at St Mary's, when the church is decorated with all manner of fruits, flowers, vegetables and corn, the staff of life. To this day, the ladies of the village continue the age-old tradition of corn platting as part of the Harvest Festival celebrations. Corn platting and the making of corn dollies is an ancient craft dating back to pagan times. Traditionally, each grain field was thought to contain a spirit of fertility that would die when the last sheaf was cut, unless it was housed in a corn dolly and kept until the next harvest. The corn dolly was customarily made from the last bundle of grain cut by the oldest harvester, and at the time of the next harvest was fed to the best cow or mare, or ploughed into the first furrow. More recently, corn dollies are generally associated with fertility and good luck, and are hung as decorative symbols. The red colour of the ribbon is a traditional colour to represent the warmth of the sun. This short video presentation, made in September 2010, records the ladies of the village practicing the age-old craft of corn platting, a craft they will pass to their children and their children's children, thereby keeping this age-old tradition alive.
Harvest Festival celebrations first came to Colton in the year 1859. The Reverend Abdiel Seaton was the rector at the time, and it must have been a great day of celebration, according to the report in the paper. The newspaper being the Staffordshire Advertiser. There was a service in church, and following that there was a feast for children, followed by a major feast for adults. All types of meat was served and plum cake. This was followed by country dancing. The social event took place in a tent that must have been absolutely enormous, because everyone from the parish was here, as well as visitors. This tent was set up in the Barcroft on the far side of the Brook Bridge from the church. It was decorated with flowers, with leaves and with ears of barley amongst the flowers and the fruit and the vegetables, I believe, as well. The church service commenced at 2 o'clock. We have great detail in the Staffordshire Advertiser explaining that the choir were present and how many clergymen, I would think a large number from around the district, to see and hear and partake in the first celebration of harvest at Colton. The church was decorated with many flowers and again with leaves. The pillars were encircled with leaves, and in amongst the leaves were ears of wheat. There were sheaves of wheat in the porch, and it was a very eventful day. From 1930, my mother became one of those who was involved in the decorating of the church and certainly in the corn platting. In this photograph, taken by my godmother, who was housekeeper at Colton Rectory in the early 30s, you find from the left Miss Ellen Rottrell, who many of us remember as either a Sunday school teacher or the lady who delivered the post. Next to her is Miss Lucy Norman, the aunt of Norman Baker. Central is my mother, Mrs. Alice Cooper. Alongside her is Mrs. Stevenson. Finally, on the far right is Miss Eva Jones, the younger sister of Miss Dorothy Jones. From those early years, 150 years ago, the farmers and their farm servants would be using a sickle or a scythe with which to cut the corn, whatever crop it was, and bind by hand into sheaves to put them in the fields in stuck formation of 6 stuck standing together in order to dry. Eventually, with the coming of machinery, progress would soon be made towards using a horse-drawn binder which would cut and bind, and the farm workers would stand the stucks together in the field. By the 1940s, there were tractors here in Colton, and we know that Manor Farm used tractors from those early years, certainly during the war and post-war. With the coming of the combine harvester in the 1950s, many things were changed. The drying of the seed had to happen on the farm premises, and it is sure that the Manor Farm had by 1950 a dryer, a hand-built dryer by the farmers themselves. The harvesting had changed completely, which also brought in changes to receiving the shooks of corn for the harvest plaiting. During these years, the plaiting has taken place in various venues situated around the school and the church and now the village hall. To begin with, in the early 1930s, certainly, the plaiting took place in the old schoolroom, which was part of the farm buildings of the rectory, virtually where the new rectory stands today. By the beginning of the war, the plaiting was taking place in the east room of the school, somewhere about where the school hall stands today. After the war, the ladies moved into the reading room, and then of course with the coming of the village hall, the last 20 years, the plaiting has taken place within our village hall. After the Second World War had ended, my father collected sheaves of corn from all the neighbouring farmers within the parish, going round in an evening and then delivering them to the reading room, ready for the next day's plaiting. The Mellor family continued their tradition of delivering their own. In the photographs you see ladies at Crabtree Farm with the farmer Nigel Knight. We see Miss Dorothy Jones, Mrs Rose Duval and Mrs Dora Deacon, who is the sister of Lucy Norman. The wheat is prepared, some at our house in advance for the plaiting ladies so that they can make a start as soon as they arrive in the village hall. But also a large number of ladies and a few gentlemen turn up with their scissors and secateurs to cut to prepared length of probably about 10 inches, taking off the outer cover of the stalk. Then these are given to the platters for them to start work. Each plaiting lady will have a small card on which is the name of the wreath as to where it is going in the church and the length. The length must be precise, particularly when they are having to be tied in position. The cutters up still work as they did way back in 1875. As the platters sit at the table, they take 7 stalks of wheat in 3s so that they work the plait. The work is very intensive in that although they can sit and chat, their nimble hands and fingers are working all the time. Many of the ladies who plait at the moment have been coming for many years. It is always taught from someone who knows, with an apprentice sitting beside. My mother taught many people to plait, including Mrs. Ivy Preston, who then became one of the platters for many, many years. As the plait drops over the far side of the table, someone goes to assist and measuring takes place, because they have to be accurate, particularly when they have to hang or be tied. Once the plait is completed, more string is used to tie off the plait so that it is firm and tight, and then the plait is laid upon its face and the back is trimmed. This is quite important, especially where a plait has to lie against a level surface and is not tied in position. All this takes place in a lovely, happy atmosphere. The plaiting process has probably lasted 3 to 4 hours in this particular day and age. In years gone by, doing more plaits, it took more time. The plaits are then taken to the church. David and myself usually go, armed with scissors and string, place them in position. The pillar and pulpit plaits are tied in place to secure them. The font plait now lies at the foot of the font, around the stem of the bowl, whereas in years gone by it was placed on the top of the font, around the edge, and the flowers placed just inside. Usually on the Saturday following the corn plaiting, the flower arranging ladies arrive in church to place their flowers in amongst plaits or on window sills, and also on the window sills are small stalks of corn that have been cut to length and tied firmly so that they stand quite erect on the window sills. We always try to have at least 3 rough shucks, just as they've been cut from the field, so that they symbolise what the shucks would have looked like as they stood in the cornfields of yesterday.